before you made your millions, before the e-ticket, how did you feel? And he said, I felt terrible about myself. And then the doctor said, well, how did you feel after the millions and the e-ticket and JetBlue? He said, I felt the same. The millions didn't make a dent in how I felt about myself. So, you see, he wasn't brought up to really feel good about himself, and he wasn't given any types of instruments or diary pages or coaching or anything else to offset the issues that he had. And you see, money can't buy those feelings of self-esteem. It has to come from within. And what I like to encourage parents is to help their kids find that special teacher that's going to be the type of teacher that's going to help them feel good about themselves, someone that can be there for them and reassure them. And you don't have that many special teachers that are like that. And it's really important to encourage your child to seek out that kind of teacher that will make the difference, because many times the teacher will take the place in that respect of a parent who just doesn't know how to really be there for their child, son or daughter.
Right.
And it's really important to seek out that teacher, because that teacher can be the turning point for someone that feels like Mr. David Needleman to someone who feels like Albert Einstein. And the teacher has a lot to do with it.
Absolutely. And so let's talk about teachers for a moment and the role that they play, because you said, it's self-esteem, but it really has to, don't you think it starts outward, like with teachers, with parents, and then it becomes positive self-talk? But before it can become positive self-talk with the child, they can't be told negative things all day long, and we expect them to have a positive self-image.
Right. So it really does.
What can teachers do? Like, what can they do?
Teachers need to understand. One of the things I talk about in some of my lectures is nurture versus nature. Very often, if children are not in special schools like Churchill in Manhattan or Arrowsmith all over the country, teachers have a lot to handle. They have, 15, 20 kids in a classroom, and the last thing they want is someone who's, like when I was in a classroom for children with ADD, hitting their head against their table, their desk, or spacing out into the outside through the window. Teachers need to be taught when they're in regular public schools through lectures and classes what it feels like to have a bag over your head with little holes so your eyes can see through it. They need to be taught, and this actual workbook is being used to teach teachers how to become more practical and empathetic towards children with invisible learning disabilities. And it's important for teachers to be able to sit on the other side and see what it's like to have to pretend that you're understanding the same thing over, even though that you don't, even though the teacher might say it once or twice. It's important for teachers to understand what it's like to have mental blocks again, with certain things like math and science, but to be able to make absolutely gorgeous posters, and the frustrations that come with that and the confusion that comes with that, to be so great at something and so terrible at something else, creates a lot of confusion. So teachers that are in the public school systems often don't understand how to handle kids with ADD, and it's the job of professionals to make them aware of how they can better communicate with children and also recognize the signs of children that are starting to get into really bad zones of feeling really depressed about themselves and out of control through drawings that kids do. Drawings tell a great deal. Through taking a child to the side like I did in classroom and talking to them quietly and separately outside the classroom as to what's going on and things of that nature. And it's also very important to have the teacher connect with the parent on a regular basis. And you had said to me before this interview started that you really like the homeschool accountability form.
Absolutely.
And you want to go into why?
Yeah, I want to talk about that, and I'm going to turn to that section because I'm sitting here with the book. But I love the whole workbook, and I'm doing this with my son right now, who is 13, and he really needs this. My daughter kind of found tools on her own, which is kind of what you learn to do, and that's what I had to do because, I'm 39, so when I was growing up, ADD and ADHD, they weren't real terms. They weren't, your father was doing that work, but it hadn't reached me, let's put it that way. So nobody really was helping me. So when I couldn't open my locker and I would get frustrated, I would just go to my class with no books. And the teacher just thought I didn't care, and it wasn't that I didn't care. I couldn't get my locker, and I was embarrassed. So let's talk a little bit about embarrassment and ADD and ADHD and how a teacher can kind of help with that. My son gets extra time to take tests and to do things, but he doesn't often like to ask for the extra time because he feels like he's being singled out, or people will go, well, why does he get extra time and I don't get extra time? And so he doesn't want to be different. He doesn't want to be the different kid in the class. So how can a teacher help a child feel more comfortable about asking for accommodation for their ADHD?
Well, in practical forms, it's not supposed to be something. When I was working as a teacher with kids with ADD, everything is done very discreetly, and kids aren't not supposed to feel different, because in each classroom there'll be kids being taken out for different reasons. So it's really more the kids feeling self-conscious, but it's important to point out that there are other kids that are getting extra time for different things, and that those kids that need extra time for certain things will need less time for other areas than other kids, and that the kids really don't know what the other ones who don't get extra time or extra attention in resource room or in inclusion are doing at home at night. Maybe their parents are really helping them a great deal or doing the homework for them, or something like that. So we have to point out to the children that they really don't know what's going on with the other kids' lives, and that you can tell from the outside that your child is getting extra help, but that may mean also that they'll exceed the other kids that don't need extra help one day, and it's just a matter of time till that comes out.
And I told my son, I said, take advantage of it. You don't know how much I wish I had extra time for my SATs. And, I wish they had accommodations when I was younger.
Absolutely.
It didn't exist. It didn't exist.
Right. And a teacher that's very sensitive. I'm sorry for interrupting. Go ahead.
That's okay. No, I was just saying there was no such thing.
Absolutely. It only started to become more prevalent, and people became more aware of it in the 90s. And that's because there was a lot more stress on kids also to be competitive, to make those scores as high as possible, to be in the upper percentile. And so kids that did not come out 100% got a lot of attention, and sometimes there was negative undertones. So that, unfortunately, the pressure and the competition has hurt kids that are slower in reading, who have dyslexia, or slower in understanding things because they have auditory processing issues that come very often with ADD. They'll actually really suffer as a result. But the teacher that I would have liked to have had for you as a kid would have been the one that would have brought you to the side and said, what's really going on? Why don't you have your books? If it's do you not care? And if you wouldn't have been able to say something except, I can't open it, then that teacher who would either have an assistant or would tell the class to wait a minute, would go out with you to the locker, which I had to do with kids, and find out what the problem is with the lock. Maybe the lock isn't working, maybe a combination lock isn't going to work, maybe you need a key lock or something else.
Absolutely. Because, see, I was just too tired of going down to the office asking what my combination was. I would try to remember to write it on a piece of paper and bring it, and then I'd forget, and then I still had difficulty opening it, and I was like, oh, forget this. I'm not doing this, and I would just try to play like I was cool, Oh, I don't need my book. I'm cool, and it wasn't that I was cool. It was that I felt dumb because I couldn't open my locker. And so I, when I got boyfriends, what I would do is I would say, oh, can I put my books in your locker? And then a lot of times they'd open their locker, and so I started to learn these little tricks, and this is what my daughter's doing now. So we would use our looks to actually help us with our ADHD.
You see how clever that is? Someone with ADD may not be on that level of cleverness, and that's something that's really positive. Now you know it as an adult, but then as a child, no one pointed that out to you. If a parent is really on target, they'll say, you know what, honey, that was pretty darn